Thank you, Sanjana, for the introduction. A very good afternoon to everyone. This upcoming session is on a very significant issue, which is often overlooked till we come face to face with it. Yes, and that is animals in disaster. In this session, the speaker will explore the current disaster management policy in India and the status of its implementation. We will also discuss that why is it important to protect animals during disaster, how disaster management departments work at state and district level, and the role of national and state disaster management authorities. I now introduce our speaker, the very experienced Mr. Hansen, who has many feathers in his cap. Hansen is an FAO consultant at the Emergency Management Center for Animal Health, responsible as the sub-regional assessment lead for South Asia. He is leading the implementation of animal health emergency management systems for South Asia using the FAO's progressive pathway for emergency preparedness tool in alignment with the Animal Health Emergencies of International Concern Strategic Action Plan. Hansen has been working in the humanitarian sector since the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. He is specialized in community development, participatory approaches, and international humanitarian standards such as sphere minimum standards and livestock emergency guidelines and standards, also known as LEGS. Before joining FAO, Hansen worked as a project manager for World Animal Protection, where he was instrumental in engaging with veterinary universities and disaster management authorities to establish and strengthen the veterinary emergency response units in India. He also regularly trains humanitarian professionals and government officials, including paramilitary forces, on the management of animals in emergencies through simulation exercises and capacity building initiatives. Please keep posting your questions in the chat box, which is on the left side of your screen, and we'll come back to your questions after the session. I extend a warmest welcome to Hansen. Over to you, Hansen.
Good morning to all, and thank you so much for the kind introduction, Sanjana. First of all, I would like to thank FIAPO for this invite and this opportunity to share my experiences on protecting animals in disasters. So, yeah, I would like to share my screen to start the presentation. So, yeah, before I go into the presentation, I would like to give a brief backdrop on animals in disasters. Actually, if you look at this term, animals, it's a really very broad terminology because animals can include birds, animals can include livestock, they could include pet animals, wild animals, captive animals, fishes, and a whole range of species. So animals is a very broad terminology. And when we also talk about disasters, disasters is also a very broad term because when we say in disasters, it includes floods, droughts, cyclones, tsunamis, and many disasters that we see in recent years. We have been seeing in recent years in both India and globally. So when we talk about protecting animals in disasters, it is something that needs to be comprehensive enough to see how the needs of different species can be addressed and in different disasters, how it can be planned and intervened in different disasters and different regions. So I think this is something I'll be talking about in this presentation. If we need to plan any intervention to protect animals in disasters and how we should go about it. And I think it will need a more of a collective effort and it will need a more comprehensive way of addressing the needs of animals. So with that, I would like to go into the presentation. So in today's presentation, I'll talk about 4 components. One is a big question that is in front of all of us. Why do we need to protect animals in disasters? Because we often say that there are many debates on this. Do we really need to protect animals in disasters? Or is it their fate that they should suffer in disasters? Or can they take care of themselves in an event of disaster? So there are many thoughts and many views and many perspectives on this. But I would like to throw upon some information on facts on why really we need to protect animals in disasters. The second point, what are the legal framework that are existing to protect animals? Are there any legal frameworks that really help us or enable us to undertake disaster interventions for animals? So I'll be sharing some of those that are there at the national level, as well as some at the regional level. And so animal protection initiatives. So what are the animal protection initiatives that we could take? And there have been organizations that have already been implementing this, trying some of this, and also some that needs to be implemented in a more large-scale manner, because it has been tried and tested in pilot basis in different disaster-prone areas in the country. So I'll be sharing some of those initiatives. And finally, based on my experience in working in this sector for almost more than 17 years, I'll share some of the lessons that I've learned to see how we need to come together as a community, because I know that we all are having a common cause to protect animals in different aspects. So as we all need to work together and see how we can learn from each other and see how we can collectively address some of these concerns while dealing with the protection of animals in disasters. So with that, I'll move into my first point on why do we need to protect animals from disasters? The first question. So often there are many stakeholders. When we say any disaster intervention or humanitarian intervention or response, it includes a diverse set of stakeholders. And it includes humanitarian organizations, it includes animal protection organizations, it includes private agencies, government, the local community, and many organizations. And everyone's playing their part in what they can do from their mandate or from their capacities or from whatever they feel is best for the society. So I would like to share some facts on why it is really important that we need to work together in protecting animals. So when we say animals, we often see them in isolation. But the fact is, we are living in an ecosystem where all lives all lives are intrinsic and have an intrinsic value in with each other. And people and animals play a very intrinsic part in the society, which is inseparable and cannot be separated. And it's really important that we address the concerns of both the people and animals and the environment as a whole. So I would like to share, as if you look at the livestock care and management, the related activities to the livestock care and management, especially in the rural areas, it's mainly the women who plays a major part in taking care of them. On records, they might be owned by men. On records, it might be the male dominant society that'll be having the ownership. But however, if you look at the livestock care and management related activities, the major part is played by women. It is nearly 90% of their contribution in this sector. So why I'm saying this is, there are many organizations working towards women empowerment, gender equality, and so on. And when we say we are working towards protecting women or women rights or women empowerment in the rural areas, then we cannot ignore animals, because animals are also a part of them and they play a very important role, and it's part of their livelihood, part of their culture, part of their social practices. So naturally, it becomes very evident that if we need to protect women, then also it's important to protect animals along with them. So this is one important fact. Second point I would like to share is the ownership or the population in the country. If you look at the livestock population that's there in India, 70% of the livestock is owned by the 67% of the poor and vulnerable communities in the country. Why I'm saying this is, out of the 100% livestock population in the country, the 70% of the population, the major chunk of population of the livestock, rests with the poor and vulnerable people. So there are humanitarian organizations working to protect the poor and vulnerable in the disaster-prone areas. And they're focusing on them, which is very good, which is very good thing to do. But the fact is, often the animals are left unaddressed. Their needs are unaddressed and they are overlooked. They're not being able to be taken care of because their mandate is there only to protect people. So when you need to protect the poor and vulnerable, you cannot ignore the animals they own, because it's something that when you protect people, you also need to protect the animals. So it's something that cannot be separated. So which needs to be done together. So this is an important fact that's also there. Another aspect is the livestock subsector contributes 25% to the agricultural GDP. When we say agricultural GDP, all that comes to our mind is the crop producers and all. But I think livestock sector plays a very significant contribution to this, which is often not recognized or ignored. So which is very important, why we need to protect animals. Another important fact is, in terms of disaster losses, the animals, the impact of disasters on animals, it's the current situation is, I would like to admit that we don't have enough data. We don't have enough facts to project the impact of disaster on animals. Having said that, the fact that we have in hand right now also clearly shows how much of impact the disaster has on animals. See, if you look at this particular statistics, which is given by Central Water Commission, this is actually an average taken from 1953 to 2011. An average of all these years data put together, you get 97,000 cattle is lost to floods annually in India, which means on every day we are losing 272 cattle due to floods alone. Interestingly, in this there are two important facts which I would like to draw your attention to. One is this fact talks about cattle, which is only one species among the entire animal like a sector. If you look into it, it talks about only floods, and which is one of the disaster among the many disasters that the country is facing. So even if you take that into consideration, only one species and one disaster and so much of losses. And what happens to the other species and other disasters? The answer is we don't have data. The answer is we are not having enough data to project their losses. So what I'm trying to say is, whatever data we have also clearly shows how much of loss is incurred by the animal sector in an event of disaster. So I'll move forward. So another important fact is 36% of the disaster losses are absorbed by the livestock subsector. This is as per the FAO statistics, which clearly shows the important role played by the livestock sector in terms of absorbing the disaster losses, which acts as a buffer in terms of reducing the disaster risk in the vulnerable areas in an event of disaster. Because there is a saying, which, when we look at animals in disasters, animals are a victim to disasters. When we say people are victim to disasters, animals are a victim. At the same time, they're also a hope to the people who are suffering in disasters, which plays a dual role, which acts as a buffer to the people who are already suffering in disasters. So it plays a very important role in absorbing the disaster losses. Another important fact is, as per the World Bank, direct disaster losses to the government revenue, and 12% of direct disaster losses is incurred to the government revenue, and 2% of India's GDP, which is a very significant loss that the country is incurring due to the disasters as a whole in the country. And that's why it's important that we need to plan comprehensive measures to address the needs of all animals in all disasters, and not be selective in any particular species, or selective in any disasters, or selective in only addressing the needs of people. So it needs to be we need to have a comprehensive approach. If at all, we need to think of a way of addressing needs of all animals in all disasters. So with that, I would like to move on to the second point of the presentation, more about the legal framework to protect animals. So what are the legal frameworks that's existing in the country? So I'll start with the Constitution of India. So as we all are very familiar with this, we know that as part of the fundamental duties, it shall be the duty of every Indian citizen to protect and improve the natural environment, and to have compassion for living creatures, which gives us a strong legal backing and mandate for every Indian citizen to take responsible actions for protecting the life of all creatures, which includes animals, and in all, even the normal times, and not only in disasters. So this is a very important uh, statement that's there in the Constitution of India. The second important fact is that the National Forest Policy in December 1988, which had a goal saying that the goal is to have a minimum of 1/3 of the total land area under forest cover. And that is 33% of the country should be under forest cover. But if you look at the current state where we are, currently in India, there's only 23% of forest cover, which is way less than the minimum requirement of forest cover that we need in the country. And also, it's arguably that it might be much lesser than this, because the projected figure of 23 also includes many other plantations which doesn't come under forest, the specific designated forest areas, which has been included. However, I'm not going into that discussion. I'll just go by the point on whatever has been reported is also way less than what it has to be in a country like India. So we need to have, which means the forest cover, the forest habitats are shrinking, and it's really posing a lot of threat for the wild animals and for the national parks or wildlife sanctuaries, where you can see in many disasters, many animals are facing a lot of problems. Kaziranga, where every year we can see the flooding and many animals are suffering. In many areas, this is a area that we need to see how we can address them. Another important aspect is in 2008, the National Disaster Management Authority released a guidelines on management of biological disasters, which is a very important document, very important initiative that has been taken. In this, there is a chapter on livestock disaster management, and there are a list of gaps that have been identified for animal disaster management. However, this is really this should be really appreciated that these gaps have been very well identified. However, we need to see how we work together in addressing these gaps and plan strategies to protect animals. So this is another important document which is available, and you can refer online as well. And in 2009, an important document on disaster management, the National Policy on Disaster Management, was released. And in this, there is a chapter 7, a dedicated section on animal care, which says that it is necessary to devise appropriate measures to protect animals. And this is a very important policy statement that is there, and which enables us to take disaster interventions for animals, and also clearly specifies that this should be done at the different administrative levels in the country. What do we mean? What do we mean by all levels? Means right from the national level to the local level. National level, state level, district level, and the local level, we need to have appropriate measures to protect animals. So this is another important document that clearly shows the importance on protecting animals from disasters. Moving on, in 2013, there was a national livestock policy that was released. In this also, there is a section on animal health, which talks about developing contingency plans for disaster management, so that this should be prepared to maintain productivity and welfare of livestock and poultry sector. And this is also a very important document that was included in the policy after a very important conference that was organized on the same year in 2013 at the national level. And as a result, this policy was released, which is a very important document for planning disaster management interventions for animals in disasters, and specifically to drought-prone areas like Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, where there are several cattle camps organized during droughts. So this is also a very important step that has been taken by the Government of India. And in 2016 has been a very significant year for disaster management plan, because this was a long-awaited disaster management plan was released in 2016. And when I say National Disaster Management Plan, in the same year, 2 national disaster management plans were released. One, by the National Disaster Management Authority in June 2016, which is a more generic disaster management plan for all the ministries, all the nodal agencies to take measures to protect different sectors in a holistic manner. Where in that plan also the points on animal protection have been included. Whereas in March 2016, the Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy and Fisheries also released a dedicated national disaster management plan, which specifies clearly the role of the Department of Animal Husbandry, Dairy and Fisheries in terms of protecting livestock, poultry and fisheries. And clearly they have listed the responsibilities of the department in all the three phases of disaster: before disaster, during disaster and after disaster. So this is a very important document for any interventions that we need to plan for animals, especially livestock, poultry and fisheries, in coordination with the government in any states in India. And this is also now shared with the states so that states can devise their respective state level disaster management plan for protecting animals. Another important document is the checklist on law and disaster preparedness and response, which was released by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in 2019. So I had an opportunity to participate in two meetings or consultation meetings with the IFRC and including the animal components into this checklist. And this was released in 2019, where they have integrated the evacuation of domestic animals and livestock, and also specified that the evacuation plan should address both issues in order to ensure the safety of people and their animals during disasters, which is a very important document, because this applies to all the Asia Pacific countries. And this checklist is shared within the National Red Cross Societies by the IFRC within the Asia Pacific region, so that it would help many stakeholders, including the Red Cross and many other stakeholders working in the disaster humanitarian sector, to take initiatives to protect animals and include animals in their interventions. So moving on, so that was the point I thought of sharing on the legal framework. So moving on to the third point on animal protection initiatives. So there are several initiatives taken by different organizations, animal protection organizations, the disaster management agencies, private agencies, and so on. I would like to share broadly a few areas that are really important if we need to plan a holistic or comprehensive interventions for addressing the needs of animals. One is the training and capacity building programs. When we say training and capacity building programs, because this is based on the gaps that have been identified in the National Disaster Management Guidelines, as I shared earlier. So how can the gaps be addressed? So we need to have comprehensive trainings and capacity building programs for all stakeholders. When I say all stakeholders, it includes the animal protection organizations, the veterinarians, the para-veterinarians, the community, the NGOs, the humanitarian stakeholders involved in this sector, so that we have a lot of human resources trained on this area to address the needs of animals, especially. And there are programs also being promoted globally, which also could be used, like courses, online courses, such as PrepVet, veterinary preparation by World Animal Protection. Many online courses are there also, which also could be used, but we need a lot in contextualized trainings and capacity building programs for stakeholders within our country as well. Another aspect is on strengthening the legal and institutional frameworks, because we have very good legal framework that are already existing in the country. We have the policy, we have the plan, we have the guidelines that are existing. However, having said all this and whatever we have in place, strengthening legal and institutional frameworks, the more thrust area or the focus would be on the operationalizing whatever is there existing in these policies. Second, institutionalizing aspects like establishing veterinary emergency response units in every state in the country. Like we have currently we have 6 units on a regional basis established in India. However, this should be further extended to all the states so that we have enough institutional capacity and the provisions to see how emergency response operations can be taken to protect animals in disasters. So this needs to be strengthened further. If at all, we need to have real interventions to protect animals in disasters. Another aspect is promoting a culture of preparedness. So we often talk of fact that if you spend $1 in preparedness, or the risk reduction is equal to saving $10 in response, which emphasizes the importance on preparedness. We need to see that how we give more focus on preparing our communities, preparing the animal owners, the local communities and stakeholders who are very close to the animals or managing animals to take meaningful actions in an event of disaster so that their animals can be saved. This would help in promoting the culture of preparedness, like in terms of awareness programs or like having a public service announcement messages, delivering the messages to the community on time, because we have these messages for people to evacuate on time. But do we have messages for animals, for people to take care of their animals to safety, the evacuation routes, and what are the meaningful actions they can take in different types of disasters? So these are some things that we can give more focus so that a culture of preparedness could be in place, and the first responders, that's the community, can take meaningful actions before external assistance could reach them. Another important aspect is when we, as I shared earlier, when we talk about animals, animals is a very broad terminology. So if we are told we need to intervene, then we need to have species specific as well as region specific disaster interventions. So this is in an event of disaster, depending on the disaster. If it's a flood, the intervention will be different. If it's drought, it will be different. And it depends on the region as well as the species. So species specific and region specific disaster interventions or protocols need to be devised and implemented. So there are many tools or handbooks that can help in decision making, such as livestock emergency guidelines and standards, and many other tools are there that are already existing at the international level, which also could be used for what we can do within the country to protect species and region specific disaster interventions. Finally, I would like to highlight the fact on baseline information and data management. So this is a very important area because as I shared, the data, we don't have enough data. We don't have mechanisms to capture data, compile data, or report the data. So we need to have a dedicated measures in place to capture the baseline data, and it should be disaggregated depending on the species, depending on the age of animals, species of animals, and there should be mechanism to manage them so that this could help the stakeholders take actions or plan interventions for protecting animals. So these are some of the broad areas I thought I could share if we need to plan comprehensive animal protection initiatives in disasters. And in continuation to that, I would like to share a framework. If you need to plan animal protection initiatives, there are certain factors that you need to keep into consideration. One is the intervention needs to be species specific, because every species, the requirement is different. The species specific requirements should be taken into consideration, because if it's a livestock, it will be different. If it's a pet animal, it will be different. If it's a captive animal, it will be different. And if it's a wild animal, it will be different. And it depends on the region and many other factors. So species specific requirements is a very important aspect that needs to be kept into consideration while planning any animal protection initiatives. Second, it should be disaster specific. When we say disaster specific, because the vulnerability to disasters depends from region to region, and depending on that, whether if it's an earthquake or flood or drought or any disaster, it needs to be planned according to that. So the capacities or the resources should be planned depending on the disaster specific requirements and the species specific needs that are in place. In addition to this, also the region. that the intervention need to be planned should be taken into consideration, because the geographical consideration plays a very important uh, role. Because if it's a coastal area, it will be different. If it's a hilly area, it will be different. And if it's the floodplains, if it's different. If it's a forest area, it's different. So it depends on the region, in which region the intervention needs to be planned, and appropriate actions should be considered. Finally, I would like to highlight the fact that any intervention that we plan for animals should revolve around the fact that they should be welfare centric, because ultimately, end of the day, the animal should be at the center of the intervention. And whatever we do, we are all aiming towards ensuring that the welfare and the needs of animals be addressed comprehensively. And if it needs to be comprehensively addressed, the 5 animal freedoms should be taken care of. One is their hunger and thirst, their discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease. And do they have the freedom to express normal behavior, or from their fear and distress? So these are the 5 freedoms that also need to be taken into consideration while designing or planning any animal protection initiatives, and they should be welfare centric. And in addition to this, there are several global and national standards and guidelines and frameworks that are existing, like livestock emergency guidelines and standards. And there are standards tools by FAO. There are OIE standards, World Organization for Animal Health. Sendai framework has a lot of targets that have been mentioned, and also livestock targets have also been included in their Sendai framework, which was not there earlier when it was before Sendai came in the Hugo framework for action. But in Sendai now, there is a clear-cut target for protecting livestock as well. And there are many government schemes also being planned for which could be taken into consideration while planning any animal protection initiatives. And in addition to this, the local culture, norms, and practices plays a very important role, because this is a very sensitive area that needs to be taken care or considered, because the lifestyle practices or the religious beliefs differ from place to place, and any intervention needs to cater to understanding this and understanding the dynamics that are existing there within the community before planning an intervention. So, in a nutshell, these are some of the elements that are really very important if we need to plan a comprehensive disaster management interventions for protecting animals. Yeah, so with that, I would come to the last part of the presentation on the lessons learned. So there have been several lessons that we have learned based on the work and working with different stakeholders in the country, and based on the work we have experienced working with the community, the government, this, animal protection organizations, and many other stakeholders who have taken part in this process. So I think this is something that would help us to see how we can use these learnings to build upon our approach and strategy for enhancing our capacity and resources to protect animals in disasters. The first point I would like to talk upon coordination. Coordination is a very important element when it comes to disaster management and working in disaster sector, because there are several stakeholders involved, several coordination aspects needs to be taken into consideration. However, the fact is, engaging diverse stakeholders is time-taking and challenging. However, it cannot be ignored, and it needs to be done so that it can be holistically addressed, and all stakeholders play a very important role in their own, based on their own capacities and whatever mandate they have, so that they can contribute. However, even though it's challenging, it's really rewarding. Based on my experience, it's really rewarding end of the day to have good coordination mechanisms that can help protect animals. So coordination is a very important aspect that needs to be considered in terms of how we plan our intervention, and we cannot ignore the fact, and this is something we need to build upon and strengthen coordination mechanisms in the country for protecting animals. Second aspect is on commitment. When we say commitment, there are, as diverse stakeholders are involved in the process, the commitment needs to come from different stakeholders, be it the community, be it the government, be it the organizations who are working there, and it needs to be culminated into a collective commitment to work to bring about a positive change for protecting animals. because however, it's easier said than done, but it is some very important and vital for bringing about a change in the society, a change in the community for protecting animals. And it really works because we have worked in many disaster-prone areas like Assam, Odisha, where it was really challenging for even constructing animal shelters. However, we could feel and experience the success once we could successfully construct that animal shelters in the disaster-prone areas, and they actually own the process. When we have the commitment, all the stakeholders own the process and they feel connected to the cause of protecting animals. So I think this is really very important. Another aspect is resources. So usually while dealing with animals and disasters, it's very challenging because we don't have enough resources, be it financial resources, be it rescue resources, the equipment, handling. If you need to handle animals in an emergency, you need a lot of technical or specialized equipment, which we don't have. So this is something we need to strengthen, we need to build upon. We need to see how we can have or innovate local resources that are there at the community level that could be made use for protecting or rescuing animals or handling animals in an emergency situation. So we would need a lot of resources in this sector to see that it can be done at a more bigger scale and to protect more animals. Another aspect is insurance, because when we say insurance, insurance sector is still a very in a very basic or preliminary stage in not only in India but in the entire Asia Pacific region, because there are certain pilots or programs on insurance for animals. However, the schemes that are currently there for animals talks about it might be a livestock insurance or poultry insurance. The name can be a livestock insurance or poultry insurance, but if you look at the benefit goes to the farmer. It's similar to crop insurance. If a crop insurance, like a crop gets damaged, and the farmer will get the benefit. It's similar to that. If a poultry gets affected, the farmer benefits. If the livestock is affected, the farmer benefits. But the real question is, are the poultry birds benefiting or all the livestock benefiting? The question is no. It's the farmer who's benefit. Then that should be named as farmer insurance and not the actual animal insurance. So there needs to be a lot of clauses included in the insurance schemes, which enables or ensures that the benefit goes to the animal health, the well-being of animals, and the protection of animals from extreme weather condition, in addition to the welfare the farmer is getting, and not merely the benefit only for the farmer. It should be in addition to the benefit of the insurance the farmer is getting. The animal should benefit. The animal welfare should be taken care of. So which is an area that needs to be developed and improved upon. Another important aspect is research, because there's a lot of opportunity for research and education on protecting animals from disasters. When we say research, see, there are still, this is an area that opens up a scope for many devising innovative ideas to protect animals. We need resources like equipment. We need resources to rescue animals. We need shelters, disaster-specific shelter blueprints, which we don't have. So there are many biosecurity strategies that we can take care of on protecting animals from different types of biological hazards. So this needs a lot of research to understand how we can come out with innovative ideas or to comprehensively address the needs of animals in a disaster event. Finally, I would like to share that One Health. See, ultimately, all efforts that we take need to address the One Health and welfare of both people and animals together. Because when we say we are working for protecting people, animals are part of it. When we say we are working to protect animals, people are also part of it. So it cannot be separated. So they are together, and we are all together in this ecosystem. So ultimately, we need to have a way of working together for protecting all life forms on Earth. So One Health is an area that we all need to collectively work upon and contribute so that we can have a healthier ecosystem and ensure the well-being of both people and animals together, and have a bright future for our future generations and for the future generations to come. So with that, I would like to thank once again FIAPO for giving this opportunity to share my experiences, and I will be happy to answer any questions if you might have. And also kindly urge all the stakeholders participating in this conference for your kind participation and contribution to join hands for collectively taking this initiative forward in protecting animals from disasters, because this is an area that is often overlooked, and we need more stakeholders, more resources, more hands to come together for this particular cause. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hansen, for this wonderful talk. And it was so informative. And thank you for explaining the legal framework around disasters. This is one area which is often overlooked. So disaster management, we don't think about it, till we face the disaster. So there are so many questions, and I would like to share them with you with a quote that it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. So it's very important in this, the disaster preparedness is one of the very important aspects that you have rightly pointed out. So the first question is, what are the opportunities for an ordinary person, ordinary citizen to help in the disasters? Are there any capacity building programs that an ordinary person can go and learn disaster management and rescue animals?
Right. Yeah, thank you, Surjana, for that question. Yeah. So, yeah, this when we say the opportunities for learning or getting trained on these particular areas. So, as I shared in the presentation, like there are some online courses like PrepVet. PrepVet is a veterinary preparation, which is an online course which is offered by World Animal Protection. There is a course by FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agencies, on animals and disasters. So there are certain courses if you want to get understanding to learn about some of the aspects of protecting animals in disasters. This is one thing. Second is, there are in the country, in India, there are certain courses that are being offered through the veterinary emergency response units. This is limited to the veterinary universities where the VERUs are, like for the veterinary students. However, they also organize trainings for government officials, veterinarians, and other stakeholders from time to time. But for any any other public who's interested, I think as of now, I would rather say that the scope is very limited. There are no such open trainings or courses that they can have access to. But I think through this conference as a platform, I would like to urge stakeholders to see that, make use of this opportunity to see how we can plan certain trainings together, so that if anyone's interested for such trainings, there are certain modules dedicated to different stakeholders, like for the veterinarians, there are dedicated training modules. For humanitarian professionals, there are dedicated modules. And depending on if it's a public, general public, then we can have separate training. So it is a time to see that we come out with different stakeholder-specific training modules to address the need and impart trainings to whoever's interested. So I think we need to we need to take this forward. We need to see that how it can reach to many people who are interested to learn this course as of now. Thank you.
Wow, yes. So this is the news that we don't have training programs for ordinary people. And I think a lot of people are interested in rescuing animals during disaster. Next question is, are there any organizations or projects in India to protect wild animals from disaster?
Yes, there are organizations like WTI, HSI, and like even in IFA. So there are organizations who are doing, but if you ask, the scale of their operation is limited to the capacities they have, their teams, depending on the team capacity and depending on the disaster events they're operating. So the point I would like to make is, if we need to do it in a larger scale, considering the country like India, if we need to have a bigger mechanism or a established institutional framework or mechanism, I think we need to start developing them and taking it forward. But in a random basis, in a sporadic manner, depending on disaster events, there are organizations who are taking good initiatives, but this is all at a small scale. We need to encourage and also urge the government to take active steps where both animal protection organizations and government, we can work together to see how this can be taken up, to have better institutional mechanisms for addressing issues for wild animals in addition to the livestock. Because for livestock, there are institutions with the Department of Animal Husbandry who are having certain resources or measures or are being taken up. But for other animals like wild animals or exotic animals, even captive animals, I think we need to have more specialized, and that would require specialized teams and specialized trainings and different legal mechanisms as well, because dealing with wild animals, laypersons need special permissions from the authorities to intervene as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. The next question is, so we know that aquaculture is a booming industry in India, and with the government giving so much importance to this sector, the aquaculture farmers and these ponds are often located in places near large water bodies, and are which are prone to flooding and all. So what kind of disaster preparedness do you think these farmers need to work on to protect their animals during floods?
Right. Yeah, so when we say aquaculture or fisheries related, ensuring the safety of their fish that are being farmed in their centers, first of all, it's very important, as I said, the approach that we follow to, we need to understand the area there based on an assessment. Like we need to assess the resources that are existing there. What are the challenges? What are the resources? What are the coping mechanisms that are already existing? There might be some traditional coping mechanisms that are existing there. And I think it's more important that we engage all the like-minded stakeholders who they are they have relation with, including the local communities, so that proper assessment can be done and proper intervention mechanisms could be identified. So because that would be the right way of going forward on based on the findings of the assessment, to understand the situation and decide accordingly. I think legs is a very important tool that could be made used. Livestock emergency guidelines and standards, which helps decision makers for planning any livestock. It's specifically for livestock, but it can also be contextualized for fisheries or aquaculture related, this one, based on the approach. It gives you the approach. You can follow the approach, the 4-stage approach that are there in legs, which will help in planning the interventions and decision making, and seeing how you can address the needs of the farmers there and the fishes that are farmed there. To ensure, there are also organizations like Fish Welfare Initiative, specifically for ensuring the welfare of fish. So these are very good steps as well.
Great, thank you for that answer. Next question is that we often see that there are compensation plans in case of mortality of animals. So government does compensate the farmer, the owner of livestock. But does that compensation also includes morbidity? Like if there is a disability or some other welfare concern, veterinary treatment. So do the compensation plans also cover the morbidity part?
There is, as per the National Calamity Contingency Fund, there is a provision for compensation for the people who have lost their animals in disasters. This specifically, when we say animals, specifically for livestock. It doesn't apply to many other animals, mainly livestock, cattle, for to be more specific. And this provision, there is a provision as per the fund to get compensation for the loss. And there is also state-wise compensation packages that are offered from the state fund into this, but it depends from state to state, and it's not common to all states, because in Kerala, the compensation for the loss of cattle would be different. In Karnataka, it will be different. So it differs from state to state, because depending on what initially the states providing. But there is a provision for this compensation for loss. But for when you ask about morbidity in diseases or related to injuries, I think this is need to be really strengthened further, because there are no proper clear-cut areas of to define this one, and it's the provisions to that is very not clearly defined as well. But when you say loss, that is clear, they will get a loss, but the amount may differ from state to state. When we say morbidity, injury, or even for that matter, as I said, the lessons learned, insurance. So these are some areas that are really we need to still work a lot to ensure that the animals that are kept, if they have any injuries, if they have any health issues, there should be clauses to also include benefit for them. I think these are some of the areas that we still need to improve upon.
Sure. Thanks for that answer. Next question, again, coming from a participant. Who should be the first point of contact for a community that is affected by a disaster?
So yeah, when we talk about community, is it because community can be an urban community, rural community. If you would say it's a rural community, I think it's very important the community who owns the animal, they are closest, whoever's closest to the animals, they are the first responders. So they need to take active measures to ensure that their animals are safe. So which is, we say that following any disaster, the first 30 minutes to 1 hour is the golden time, where practically no external help can actually reach them. Even if at all they reach, it cannot reach to all of them. So in that particular golden time, it gives a very important time for the community to respond in taking care of their animals. So ideally, the animal owners were closest to them, either pet owners or livestock owners, whoever it is, who was closest to their animals. It gives them a very important responsibility to take care of them. But again, the question comes in what measures, how they will take the measures. So this is where the importance on creating a culture of preparedness comes in. So inculcating the practice of what are the meaningful actions they can take, where to go, how to go. So these are some questions we need to have answers. Then we can have that only if we have proper public service announcement protocols in place, proper message delivery in terms of which are the evacuation routes, which are the safe routes, which way they should go, how they should go. And also there are measures like how they can coordinate with the authorities there to see that they take the animals to the right place to seek whether if it is a cattle camp there, where are the cattle camps organized, if there is a temporary shelter, how to take animals to the emergency shelter, this is a process that is ideally done for people, evacuating people. We have mechanisms to evacuate people in disasters. We know with the evacuation centers, evacuation routes, but the similar thing also need to be applicable for taking the animals, because often what happens, the people are taken to the emergency shelters and the animals are left alone. So this becomes challenging. So this is where the culture of preparedness on inculcating the meaningful practices so that they can take some actions in the golden time would really help.
Yes, I think that is a very important point that you have made, that the disaster-prone communities should have, specific trainings. I think that can really help them and their animals. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making that point. So we have just 1 minute left, and last question. Hansen, you mentioned that 36% of disaster loss is absorbed by the livestock sector. So, in a resource poor country and in a resource poor situation, maybe like India, how do we balance that, with the human welfare, and where, you have to simultaneously help both, and in a resource poor setting, what are your views on that? How should that be balanced? because both are interdependent.
Right. Yeah, I think so. The point I wanted to make in that is often we have a very good response that we are a developing country, so we have to give first priority to rescue people, and animals can come later on. Which okay, so this is a discussion we have been having now for almost no more than 10 years. So, but looking as a country, as a progressive nation, as we need to develop, become more developed nation, and going by the saying what our father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi ji, has said, the greatness of the nation depends on how the animals are being treated in the country. So if we need to be a great nation and a progressive nation, we need to start that action right now, not wait for rescuing people and then go to rescue animals. There are people, there are passionate people for protecting animals. There are coming people who are ready to come for this cause. Why don't we think something parallel? Not wait first for people and then for animals. The point I wanted to make is, let's plan something in parallel to the rescue of people. There should be a rescue mechanism for protecting animals as well. I'm not saying that we should rescue animals and then people. It's a people and rescue of treating and protecting animals in parallel to protecting people is equally important. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Very true, Hansen. I think all of us will resonate in this, IFA. We definitely resonate with that thought. So with that, that was the last question. I have a lot of more questions, but I think the time is over now. So thank you so much, Hansen, for sparing your time and sharing wonderful thoughts with us and answering all the questions. Thank you so much. So participants can join us in the auditorium now for the further sessions. Thank you. Over to you, Sanjana.